What's up, guys? We're back. Another week, another pod. Uh, Joined as always by my lovely co-host, Mr. Aiden. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm fired up for today's episode. I like the topic, but I'm also fired up about the attack on net rankings. I don't know if you've seen that recently, because I completely agree, and I'm completely unbiased. Wink, wink. But I don't know. I don't know if you saw this. Basically, Clemson's head coach said that the Big 12 upped all their net rankings by playing a week out of conference schedule early in the season. So by the time they got to in conference play, they were all just high net rankings. So they had to just improve each other. And I agree. I mean, all I'm saying is the reason that Syracuse will not be in the tournament is because we chose to play in the Maui Invitational this year and lower our net ranking heading into conference play by playing Tennessee and Gonzaga. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Well, UVA played a pretty tough out of conference, and they got picked up some quad wins, but they're on the back on the bubble.
Yeah. They hate
It'll be
the
interesting.
ACC. You cannot
Yeah.
tell me the Mountain West is better than the ACC. That's ridiculous.
Well, that is ridiculous.
Okay.
It's quite
Anyway,
blasphemous. We're coming up on that time of the year, though. Conference tourneys start in about a little less than 2 weeks. So
yeah,
that should be fun. Always exciting. And then the amazing March Madness. Get to make a couple brackets.
I'm getting that perfect bracket this year, man. I have the
Yeah,
time
I
and I
say
have
that
the
every year.
energy. No, no, no. You feel me? Last year, I still got UConn as the champ for the one that I submitted for the money for my dad's pool, but that was with being sick and not being able to fully fulfill my research. You feel me? So this year, I get to fully fulfill my research, and I'm even more precise. And then boom, perfect bracket.
Yeah, I go for the more the spread approach of spamming brackets and praying one of them is correct.
That's a solid approach
Never
as
know.
well. One of these years we just got to get the government has to issue out a random bracket to each person like a lottery ticket and make sure they get every possible combination. So then one person has to get a perfect bracket in the year and it's just everybody riding with their bracket like it's a bingo card.
That would be something.
Imagine you get a 16 seed winning the chip in your bracket issued by the government though. I'd be heated.
Probably have to issue each person like hundreds of brackets though, right?
That's
Like
true. Maybe if
some crazy stuff.
maybe if you do it for the world. Did all the world powers come together for this one mission? I think that's how you find
For
peace. That's
the
how you
for the
end
perfect March Madness bracket.
that's how you fix all of our issues.
And then a random cricket player in Sri Lanka gets the perfect bracket and he's never heard of Creighton in his life.
I mean, those be the best brackets anyway, so randomization isn't that far from what people do.
True. Back in fourth grade, a girl in my class flipped a coin for each pick in her bracket, and I'm pretty sure she won the whole thing, the challenge in the class. So that's how it goes sometimes.
The worst thing that ever happened to me was getting 32nd of like everyone who submitted one to the NCAA app in 8th grade because that has made it my life's goal to get a perfect bracket or get first in one of those big like ESPN Tourney Challenge, CBS, those ones. So it set me back a couple years.
Can't say I've ever finished 32nd, but that's the goal. That's the dream.
It is.
Now, if we want to move on to more substance, uh, the topic for today is the top 10 players under 10 points per game. Not right now, but projecting them for the future. Right now, I think would be less of an interesting list. It would just be like Draymond Green, Chris Paul, and maybe not even Chris
Mitchell
Paul, but you get the point.
Robinson. Come
Yeah,
on.
he would be on there. But yeah, I think this list should be more exciting. I know Aiden has provided a more thorough player comp, whereas my player comps are more outlandish and more of a ceiling approach to each player, but that's just how I did it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say mine are still going to be higher ceiling. I'm not going to say I'm not going to come out here and say dude's going to be Landry Shamet, but that makes him top 10, that type thing, you know. But it's just if they're put into the right system, that's where I could see them blossoming into the player. And then I've also provided a ceiling just to go straight off the rails with it. So
Shamit with the bucket.
yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Jumping in. Actually, my only realistic player comp I would say, or one of my two, is my number 10 guy. I have Jordan Hawkins.
Hmm.
Not sure exactly how many points per game he's averaging right now, but it's under 10. Great shooter. Just won the Natty with UConn. Player comp I had Buddy Hield. He's not a great defender, but I think he could. I think this one's more realistic because I think Jordan Hawkins could very realistically turn into a 15 point per game, 40% from three kind of guy who's like a average defender. I don't know. So I've got Hawkins at 10. I don't think his ceiling is super high. That's why I have him at 10. But he's already pretty good. So
That's fair. I had Jordan Hawkins as an honorable mention, and I'm guessing that the guy that you don't have that I do have is a little bit of a homer pick. So we'll see. But at 10, I have Kason Wallace. I think he's really just a fundamentally good all around player. You know, he's shooting over 40% from three, I think, right now on low volume. He's a solid passer, not going to jump you out the gym with any of his playmaking, any of his athleticism, his ability to get to the rim, anything like that. But I mean, he's solid all the way around. He's good at getting in the passing lanes. I was just looking at his deflection numbers, but I don't really know exactly what they are. He's 6'3", 6'9" wingspan, so obviously that helps. Most of those guys are going to see high in the deflection rates and categories, and that kind of makes sense when you look at him. Like I feel like he's one of those guys who like it just looks like his arms are hanging off his body so low. But um, my comp for him, and this will be the laziest, I promise, because I literally just made it before we did this, was a short Robert Covington or a Trevor Ariza type player. So um, I promise to be better with mine down the line, but that's where I have it. And then I don't have a ceiling for him because really I don't know what a ceiling would be. I guess it would be like a shorter OG type thing, but I don't really know. So that's what I got.
uh yeah, and he may or may not appear higher on my list. But moving to number 9, I have a guy who might appear on the top 10 best players under 10 points per game right now, but I still think he has room to grow. It's Walker Kessler, currently averaging like 8-8 or 9-9. Uh, and I think he's pretty young. I think he's 21. Certainly room to grow. His ceiling is relatively tough because there's not a ton of really good centers that are like a not shooting, walking double double. So I'm going with the double double, Clint Capella, as his player comp. I think he could be like literally a walking double double with not necessarily great defense, but very good shot blocking ability. He's 7-1, and he already averages like over 2 blocks a game. So I've got Walker Kessler at 9.
Yeah, I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to jump off your list and add on to the player and then say where I had them because I think that flows better than just switching back and forth when eventually I'll get back to Walker Kessler. So in terms of Walker Kessler, he's one of the most elite rim defenders in the league right now. Like as you said, he'd probably be top 10. And with that in mind, I sort of had a ceiling as a lesser version of Rudy Gobert because I don't really think it's fair to give anybody outside of like Victor Wembanyama the ceiling of Rudy Gobert, considering how elite a defender he truly is. Um, he gets offensive boards well too, which I think is sort of missed. He gets defensive boards too, but in terms of his percentile numbers, 91st percentile in that category. So that led me to a slightly different player comp. I don't think Capella quite matches his defensive abilities because, as you said, Capella, he's a shot blocker, but I'm not sure how much of a true defender he is at this point. So I went with a guy who is elite around the rim, gets those offensive rebounds in Mitchell Robinson from the New York Knicks, which could be a guy on this list, but I don't have him just because there's not much further for him to go. In all honesty, like he's not. I feel like even though he's 25, he's kind of where he's gonna be.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not have Mitchell Robinson either. We discussed this before the podcast, but he's Oh, he turns 26 in like 3 weeks. He's been in the league for 5 years. And he's good, but he's just not going to get better. So I didn't include him. But my number 8 guy, someone you already said, it's Kason Wallace. I took a slightly different approach though. He is a guard, 6'3", which is, like a pretty average guard size, maybe a little larger. I compared him to Drew Holiday because I think his best skill is probably defense in comparison to like league average. He probably is already a very good like guard defender in comparison. Like could certainly be making some all NBA teams as a guard. And I didn't really want to place him in ceiling wise as like Alex Caruso, so I went with a little higher of Drew Holiday. Do I think he's gonna develop the scoring and playmaking of Drew Holiday? Probably not, but like Drew Holiday this year, he's like the fourth or fifth best player on a championship caliber team. He's putting up like 13, 5, and 5. I think that's doable for Kason Wallace. It's
Yeah,
doable,
I mean,
not out of the question.
yeah, I mean, I would say the Drew Holiday fifth option on championship team thing's sort of unique because not Drew Holiday wouldn't be the fifth option on most championship contenders
Yeah,
right now. It just happens to be that the Celtics are here and everybody else is here, which is something we can get into later potentially. But um, yeah, I don't know. I don't mind that. I think Caruso may be a more reasonable route in terms of how I project his offensive game to go. But like I said, he has been efficient from three. Now, granted, on I think 2 attempts per game or something, so not high volume, but still, um, he potentially can progress in terms of his offensive skill set. I think in order for him to do that, I need to see more offensive aggression in the interior, though. But anyway, moving on. Let's see who I have next. Oh yeah, this is the guy you probably don't have. Um, at 9, or yeah, Kessler was like I think 7 for me. We'll just go off your rankings. My rankings don't really. I mean, either way, it's kind of arbitrary. They weren't. They're all so close and so
yeah.
much speculation. But I had Precious Achua, which I imagine is the guy you didn't include. Precious Achua is 22, I think. 22, 24, something like that. He's young. Um, and I think what gives me this inclination that he can be a next level player from where he is now is how he's looked when he gets the minutes for us. He's another one of those guys, and this is actually a common thing, I think, with a couple of the guys on this list that are taller. He's another good offensive rebounder, although he's 95th percentile in offensive rebounding, which is just crazy to me. He's a versatile defender. We've seen he can play the 4 and the 5, and he can play both positions pretty well in terms of his defensive capabilities. Um, Over his last 12, which is really the stretch that he's gotten significant minutes, he's averaging 13 and 10, so not like crazy numbers, not jump off the board numbers, but still pretty solid. Um, and then he's one of those guys I think is just going to be an energy guy throughout his career. And he does tend to get aggressive at the rim, but when he was traded to the Knicks, Raptors fans kept on saying he's going to be your favorite player at points and your least favorite player at other points just because of the way he plays. He has a couple boneheaded moments, but so that made me want to go JaVale McGee a little bit, but I don't really think that's a fair player comp. I instead went Kenyon Martin with mine, who's another guy who is solid defensively, solid in terms of rebounds, but was never really an absolute outstanding player. And I don't think that Precious will ever reach that level, but I think he can be very solid. And I don't know, he could. I don't think he can be a starting four and a championship contender now with the way the NBA works in terms of his inability to shoot the basketball. He's shown at times his ability to go 1 for 1 in the game, but not really. But he can be that sort of sixth man versatile guy, which I think in some cases I have more faith in him to do that than Kason to go where you have him going. But I mean, like I said, it's all arbitrary in terms of rankings.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Precious Achua.
That's fair.
Uh, I actually think though, my number 7, I'm guessing you probably don't have on your list. It's more of an arbitrary guy. He is he's one of the two, along with Walker Kessler, that are not rookies on this list. It's Nikola Jovic. Uh, I This one's a little more out there, but from year one to year two, he showed a lot of progression. His 3 point percentage is way up. He's shooting 40 from three. And we've seen like often, I think European players could take longer to develop. Like Jokic and Giannis both took multiple years to become all stars. Uh, so I think he could be a later developer. He was also really young coming into the league. He was drafted as a teenager. Uh, so I think this one is definitely more out there, and it's less likely because he's on the Heat. He's not getting a lot of minutes, but I think he could progress into being a very good like stretch four.
I don't think it's out there at all. In all honesty, I didn't have him on my list, but honestly, part of that was because I wanted to make sure I was being as thorough as possible with some of these guys in terms of trying to project to our audience where I see them going, and I kind of ended up running out of time a little bit there, where maybe I don't think that's out there at all. Is where I'm getting at. I'm curious to see who's the guy that I have that you don't. Um, but I can definitely see it. And I mean, we've seen the way foreign players progress in today's NBA and how they're doing so. And we'll see another one later in the list, where if you watched the last episode, you probably know who that is. But anyway, let me move into who's the next guy I want to talk about. I am going to talk about this guy first, even though he's actually my number one, because most of my stuff for the guy who I have in this position um, is just he does similar things to his brother, but at a slightly worse level, which probably tells you where I'm going. I am going to tell you about Amen Thompson. And let me tell you, I didn't realize how high I was on Amen Thompson until I started watching the tape. I watched this game against the Knicks where he was just incredibly impactful all over the floor. His ability to get into passing lanes, he has a 7 foot wingspan at 6'6". So, like I said, a lot of these guys you see high in deflection percentage, which I don't think I have the number down here, but it was pretty high. Are these guys with significantly longer wingspans than most? Incredibly disruptive defender. He's very good at contesting shots. He gets all over the place. Oh, I do have his number, 96th percentile in deflections. Um, he's an incredibly agile athlete, and we've seen some of these special plays like blocking Bull Bull, which is not something that most of the league can do. Um, and I think he has the tools to be good in terms of his slashing ability, his ability to get downhill and get to the rim. He's shown off some craftiness, which with how he uses his footwork when he gets there in terms of things such as spin moves and things of that nature. I think my ceiling, and this is a crazy ceiling, would be a smaller Scottie Pippen for him, which I know is absolutely obscene to say it, anything like that. But I really like him. I really do. And then obviously he'd have a worse offensive game than Scottie. But where I'm thinking about it in this sense is he's an incredible wing defender and a point of attack defender and elite at that. So my comp, which like I said, still a little crazy when you consider his abilities, was Tony Allen, who again, another one of these guys, absolute pest on the ball, just suffocates elite level guards. Like he had a couple bouts with Kobe where he was handling him pretty well. And he's a guy who doesn't really have a 3 point game either. And I don't really see Amen progressing into that good of a 3 point shooter. I think it's possible, but I don't really think so. But Amen Thompson, I think, is going to be a depoy candidate for the majority of his career until he gets past his peak.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start jumping around too, just because I also put Amen one over his brother. Uh, I think the ceiling is higher. I think he also has a better chance of progressing or improving even marginally in the jumper. I think Azar's jumper is like too far gone. And even from the free throw line, Amen is like 10% better. Uh, so I just think he's going to be a better player. He's also just like more impactful. Like if you look at the advanced metrics, they love Amen way more, even though he gets less minutes and like just less opportunities, less stats in general. Uh, the ceiling I chose for him is Jimmy Butler. Um,
Oh, I like that.
Not a guy
I
who can
like that.
shoot threes very well, but an amazing wing defender who's just a menace. Not necessarily an amazing scorer, but a very well-rounded player. Uh, No, we'll call it more of a regular season Jimmy here because playoff Jimmy, I don't see Amen ever dropping 50 in a playoff game. But I think he can be a guy that's very, very good, very well rounded, not an amazing shooter, but could be a top option on a good team. He was my one.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'll jump to his brother. I had put Azar at 4 actually, just because I don't think his ceiling is that high. He's good right now. He's a good rebounder, very good rebounder for his size. But I just don't think he can progress much more. Like I think Amen just has a better chance at handling, like more athletic, faster, and everything. Ozar I think could be good, and I didn't really have a great guy to pick for a ceiling for him. So my player comp for him was more accurate. I actually took Jalen Johnson from the Hawks. Uh, he's a good, solid scorer, good rebounder. He can play make, but I don't think he's an amazing shooter. And I think that's what Ozar could be. I don't think he'll ever really have a jumper, but I think he could be a good, solid guy, averaging near double double numbers. So that's what I put.
Yeah, that's fair. Most of my analysis on Asar, unfortunately, just kind of ended it with a step behind his brother. I think he's a potential elite defender. I honestly think Amen's pretty close to being there already. Um, but he's not as much of a point of attack guy, and I don't really feel he has as good defensive instincts. One sort of niche thing I love when I watch Amen Thompson play is I feel like he never jumps on pump fakes. I don't know if that's because he thinks he has the agility and the quickness to just get up there after he's made sure the guy's shooting, but I mean, I don't know. I think Asar, the difference is like you said, the jumper doesn't really seem to be as much there as Amen, for lack of a better word. He plays closer to the rim, um, and so that led me to Gerald Wallace as my comp for him. Another guy with a lesser 3-point game that was a great defender, and another guy who got most of his work done on the offensive end inside the restricted area. So that's just kind of where I went with that. And then yeah, so I had him 7, I think, in terms of my list.
Yeah. Moving on, the lowest guy I haven't touched on is number 6 for me. I think you'll like this guy, even though he is the oldest guy on my list. Either 23 or 24. Uh, he dog in college hasn't got a ton of playing time this year, but I like him a lot. It's Marcus Sasser. Uh, I love his game. I love him a lot. The problem is, as I said, he's older. He's on the older side, but he's really good. I think he's really talented. In earlier in the season, when he was getting more opportunities, he was putting up these amazing stat lines. He was putting up like consistent like 18, 20 pieces, knocking down 5, 6 threes. Uh, his playing time just hasn't been there really. His consistent playing time. So maybe if he gets a chance, he could. Playing comp, not quite sure. I went with Jalen Brunson. This is
Yeah.
ceilings, remember ceilings, but he's like 6'1", not a huge guy, I'm pretty sure, but he has a really good 3-point shot. He can create his own shot. He can score from mid range and 3-point. Not a great defender, but I think he's really talented. I like him a lot.
Yeah, another guy, and I kind of like it this way because we get to talk about more players, but another guy I did not have on my list. But I mean, I think he has some of the highest ceiling and ability for growth of anybody on this list. And in my opinion, and in terms of potential, he might be up further than a lot of the guys I had. Let's see. Who do I think you don't have, and who's next on my? I'll just go to my next guy. My next guy currently plays for the Dallas Mavericks, and having Luka Doncic with him is going to be very helpful, I think, for the progression of his career. I have Derek Lively. I'm going to start you off with something that I thought was fake, in the fact that he is a 7'7" wingspan, um, one of the longest in NBA history, I believe. Um, what's weird about him is he's a good defender, and then I've seen him in situations use his athleticism to hold his own against guards, but I feel like he still has steps to take to be better. In all honesty, like I think Gafford's probably ahead of him right now in terms of rim defense. But like I said, 7'7" wingspan, and he's 7'1". He has the ability to get there. He's incredibly athletic. he's a good screener and plays well off the roll. So he plays well with Luka in that PNR action, and they have a good rapport off the court, which is always helpful. It's my understanding from everything I see that they're very good friends and very close, which chemistry is big, and that is off the floor as well as on. And then, I mean, he only takes efficient shots, so that's a plus. You're not going to see him taking any bad shots at this point in his career, and maybe he needs to switch that up a little bit to try for potential growth. But I think right now it's a good place to be. So ceiling, I had Andre Drummond as a guy who's going to grab a lot of boards, play some solid defense, and score some buckets. And then as the comp, I think you'll like this one. I had Marcin Gortat with John Wall. So
Okay.
playing off of the two man game with them well. And I think we could see a similar thing, maybe on a different level, because obviously Luca is up above John Wall as much as I love him and those early years of me watching basketball in DC with him playing. But I think the two man game, the rapport that's there, can be very similar and probably better than Wall and Gortat in the future.
Yeah, so I had Derek Lively at 2 on my list. He's a younger guy, drafted in his teens. Uh, he's obviously amazing. He shoots like 70% from the field, whatever, puts up great stats. As you said, takes only good shots. Um, I I like your Gortat to John Wall. I actually my comp I basically took that but to another level. I was thinking more. I think his ceiling is like the best lob threat in the league. So I made his player comp DeAndre Jordan, thinking Lob
Oh,
City Clippers with Chris Paul. Uh, I think he could be a guy that sneaks on some All Star teams, like, and just catches a ton of lobs from Luca and is an absolute menace, like super athletic freak, maybe like an average defender for a center, puts up great stats, double doubles. So I put DeAndre Jordan.
see, I had that one, and then I thought, like I thought, am I taking this too far? Like if you look, you won't be able to see it, but I literally had crossed out DeAndre Jordan because I thought I was taking it too far. So I'm glad that you went ahead and did it. Um, but yeah, I think he can be really good, and that two man game can be really good in the future for them. But anyway, I will move along to uh, sure. I am going to go with a player who was on the Thunder and then got traded in the Gordon Hayward deal and has been getting a lot of hype from Charlotte Hornets fans in Trey Mann. Now, he's not averaging under 10 with the Hornets, but he is averaging under 10 on the season, so it still works out for me. He's been pretty efficient from three this year. He's a solid passer and a solid creator. I think he was in the 80s in terms of his creation rate. I don't have his creation 85 passer rating, so he's got the tools to be a playmaker as well. Um, his jumper really reminds me of Tyrese Halliburton. And I know it's going to sound weird because people like, messing with Tyrese Halliburton's jumper and saying that it's not great. But I feel like his is more so like Tyrese's, except he actually starts it down. Like Tyrese starts his up and just shoots. Whereas I feel like Trey Mann actually starts his at the normal spot that most people do, but by the end it looks very similar to Tyrese. And in all honesty, I think when watching him play, he's one of those lanky guys. I think his offensive skill set could progress into one that is similar to Tyrese's in terms of his scoring, not his playmaking. Because I mean, I guess I could get there, but I haven't really seen anything that tells me he would get that high yet. But as a scorer alone, I think he looks like Tyrese. He plays with good tempo off the PNR, and that's one thing I've started to look for more and more when looking at these younger guys. I feel like at this point in the league, a lot of guards and pretty much most teams start a bunch of offensive sets off of the PNR, and you have to know how to play with leverage out of it, and you have to know how to play with tempo out of it. And from the clips I've seen of him running it, I think he does play with good tempo. A lot of times you see with some of these young guys, they sort of sprint out of it and they don't allow the leverage to get there to where your only option is to try and score, but the center's right there, so then it's just not effective. And I don't really see that as much with him. So my comp, I think I had Terry Rozier level player, and then I had Darius Garland as well as part of it, just because I feel like those I didn't want to give Tyrese Halliburton because I don't think the playmaking is going to get to that point. But I also feel like Terry Rozier isn't quite the playmaker that I could see Trey Mann developing into. So, I got Terry Rozier, Darius Garland as a comp there.
Nice. I did not have him on my list. I do love Trey Mann though. Remember him at Florida? He had a buzzer beater in March Madness once back in the day for them. Uh, yeah, he's great. I didn't have him. I don't just didn't cross my mind. I only have two guys left. I know you have one, and then the other one on my list is Brandon Podziemski uh, of the Golden State Warriors. Out of all rookies, under 10 points per game, he's like the highest. He's averaging like 9.7. So he's already good. He took Clay's starting role, which is, that's something of itself. And I put Clay as my player comp because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't look too closely into it, but it looks like like a plus defender already. Uh, he's a solid shooter. He's not like super amazing or anything yet, but he's only a rookie. So I think he could certainly develop into, his role right now is more or less a spot up shooter. He's an average defender. So if he grows, he could certainly grow into a Klay Thompson type shooting guard. That's a good defender. It's always useful and a solid sharpshooter.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't have him on this list only because when I watch him, I'm not sure I quite see the ceiling I see on these other players. I don't think he'll really get into that Clay role, or Clay level. I think he'd more so be an imitation rather than the real thing. But again, that's no knock on him because the level that Clay has gotten to is Hall of Fame, top five shooter of all time, and maybe the best off strictly catch and shoot that we've ever seen. Probably the best off catch and shoot we've ever seen in terms of what he's able to do. Um, I'm gonna go into the guy that I know you don't have then, because I think we both know where we're going after that. And this one, we'll see how you react to this one. I have Grady Dick as my next pick. He obviously, 6'6", 6'9" wingspan. He's got a pretty good build. He's an elite shooter, or on his way to being an elite shooter. And when you watch that jumper is absolute butter. It is just, it is a beautiful thing to watch. In terms of how he's adjusted to the league, I'd say he struggled out the gate. He might have been a guy that may have been better off of one more year in college. But honestly, given where his stock was at, I feel like he probably made the right choice in general. And he was balling in college. It's not like there's much more he could have been doing. One thing I think people underestimate about him because just because of the type of player Grady Dick is his ability to finish at the rim. I think he has a very crafty layup package. He's a 6'9" wingspan, and I think he uses it effectively when he gets to the rim in terms of his ability to manipulate and go around defenders. And so, with that in mind, I had his player comp as Bojan Bogdanovic. Boyan's a guy who is an elite type shooter, and yet he's also able to use his length and size when he's attacking downhill to finish at the rim. I'd say that Grady Dick, even right now, is more crafty of a finisher than a guy like uh, Boyan Bogdanovic, but I'd say in terms of progression, I think that's a similar play style to how he could be. And Boyan, when he was in his prime, he had the defensive abilities that I think Dick can develop. Obviously, they're not really there now. I think I saw a list that had him as one of the worst defenders in the NBA at the current moment for Boyan. But I don't know. I obviously, if you know me, I've been a supporter of Kansas for a while. So I watched a lot of Grady Dick film, and I think he, as he's getting more minutes, he'll start playing better, and he's averaging 14 over his last six. So we're already starting to see that sort of as he gets more feel for the game and get more comfortable, him progressing. So
Yeah, I love Dick. What? It was low hanging fruit, but no. I will say I didn't have him on the list. I went to the Raptors game earlier in the year, obviously with you, Wizards Raptors, and he got in garbage time when they're up 30. So uh, I guess that was sort of just my first impression of him, so I didn't put him on the list just because he did really start off the year quite poor and worked his way out of the rotation entirely on a team that is not competing really. So I didn't have him, but yeah, I have seen that he's been playing more and better lately. So he definitely has the intangibles. He's athletic, tall, good shooter. Certainly could grow into a great player.
Yeah.
And then the last player that we both have would be Bilal Koulibaly. Um, uh, he's not great. He's not amazing right now, but it's really hard to be on that Wizards team. Like that team is just so dysfunctional. I think it's the worst organization in the league right now. Uh, coming into the year, Jordan Poole's expectations were to be a 24 point per game scorer, and he's averaging like 15 a game. Uh, and maybe that's more on Jordan Poole, but I just think that the team as a whole is just not run very well. It's just not a place where a lot of people can thrive. Uh, but I think Bilal could be very good. He's a solid rookie. He's probably going to make an all rookie team. He's a good defender. He's got a massive wingspan, I believe.
Yeah,
So
7'2", 7'3".
yeah, it's hard to speculate with him because of his situation. I would say where he's kind of surrounded with a lot of guys that like to take a lot of shots. Uh, so it's hard to really tell what he can become. But I was doing ceilings. I put Mikal Bridges. I think he could be a wing that can be very well rounded and a good defender. Not necessarily elite in any like one aspect of the game, but I think he could be a very good player. Maybe make an All Star game. Like I said, he's really young. I think he's one of the 5 youngest guys in the league right now. I think so. Definitely a lot of time to grow.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's younger than me, I believe, which is kind of crazy to have someone in the NBA who's younger than you, but or at my age at least. But I don't know. I think a lot of you're right. A lot of what Bilal is potential based, and what we've seen from him has not been necessarily consistent defensive monster type things, which is sort of more of what I see with Amen and why I had him higher, and more so his ability to use his length and his ability to use his agility to make some freak plays that have been indicators in the past of future defensive success. I think when we look at these young players and their ability to play defense, especially on a team like the Washington Wizards, which is not a good defensive team all the way around him. Um, I think as much as so, I'll just go to my comp real quick. My comp would be OG Ananobi with a lesser three, and that's one of the ones I think that was likely every situation system goes right and pushes him forward. Sorry, not likely, unlikely situation goes right and pushes him forward. But I think in order for him to be that, the Wizards have to get rid of Jordan Poole or Kyle Kuzma because they take too many shots, just flat out. And Denny has been playing well lately, not a guy you really want to get rid of. But I think by getting rid of one of those two, it allows Bilal to be put in a situation where he has to develop more as an offensive threat. And he's not a bad shooter. I mean, 35.7, as we've talked about, is slightly below average, but it can develop, in my opinion, at least. And I think he can also develop some of this, the ability to use his length and his agility to get downhill, attack the rim, sort of similar to a guy like Boyan that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, with him, it's all potential, and I think he's the one. Him and Asar are sort of the two who I worry the most about their situation getting them to where they need to be, because I think it's entirely possible the Wizards keep Kuzma, and they can't really get rid of Poole because no one wants him. He's making an absurd amount of money, and then Bilal doesn't really have the ability to thrive and develop as much as he should. So I'd say he's sort of the biggest risk reward guy on this list for me.
Yeah, uh, we pretty much had the same take on him. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for him to really develop into like a true elite player. When you're surrounded by like two guys that both take like 16 plus shots a game, uh, it's just tough. It's a tough situation. So we'll see what happens to him. But he, like I said, really young, 19 years old, has a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing, it's not a name, but just when I was looking at this, it hit me how really short some like careers can be for some of these players. Like you're looking at under 10 and you get some of the guys like a Chris Paul, a Draymond Green who have long careers. And in Draymond's case, was never really much of a scorer and yet incredibly impactful regardless of that. And even Chris Paul, not a primary scorer, that type of thing. And then you have guys like a guy who really hurt me, as I said, a guy who supports Kansas, in Devonte Graham, who I have it here averaged 18 points in year two on 37% from three. And I remember there was a lot of hype about where he was potentially going to go in terms of his career. And now in year seven, he's not getting minutes for the San Antonio Spurs. So, I mean, life comes at you fast, and there's more busts than not in terms of when you look at players based on their potential because it's simply just that hard to play at such a high level, at the highest level of basketball there is, where you can have one of those careers where his career arc literally just went up immediately and then down immediately. And now, I mean, given the situation he's in, he's probably going to be out of the league relatively soon unless some team takes a chance on him to be a scorer off the bench or something for them.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's true. As a Sixers fan, we've had our fair share of guys who come in the league very good and then just dwindle off. Jahlil Okafor averaged like 18 and 9 his rookie year. Michael Carter Williams won Rookie of the Year.
Syracuse.
His debut was like insane. It was like almost a quadruple double. And both those guys after 2 years were done. Like, they could still play in the NBA, but they were nowhere anything good. Uh, and yeah, it's just really tough. Some guys it's because of injuries. Like Jabari Parker is a great example. What we don't know what he could have been, but some guys it's just you just can't play in the league. Uh, Even like a guy like Lance Stevenson, like he was pretty good for a few years, but then he just gets knocked around, goes to the bench, goes to the G League, goes to Taiwan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny you mention a guy like Jabari Parker because I listen to a lot of the basketball podcasts right now. Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart just released theirs. You have Thinking Basketball, the ones like that, and I've seen a lot of talk about him for whatever reason recently. I think part of it had to do with All Star Weekend and people are getting questions on like the best guy they played or something. But I mean, it is kind of sad what happened to him. And then another guy who's kind of like that is Greg Oden, where he's a bust, but is he really? Because I feel like most of that had to do with injuries and less about the talent and it being there. But I don't know. It's really interesting that we do this, and I've heard three or four separate guys like Brunson talked about him. I think Tatum talked about him. Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I think it was. I think Tatum talked about him and said that like he was his idol or something growing up in terms of, or not growing up because obviously the age gap is minimal, but it was something along the lines of how he carried himself, how he got to where he was, and then they played on the Celtics together, I believe, and he just like went up to him and said that when at that point in their careers, Tatum was better than Parker. So I don't know. It's pretty sad to see how some of these guys play out, and then also incredibly exciting to see how the people on this list that we just made will pan out, and we'll see if Bilal Koulibaly turns into OG Anunoby, or what was the craziest one I had here? I don't even know. Or Derek Lively turns into DeAndre Jordan, and you have Lob City Mavericks, something like that. And then I don't know. I always feel like these type of things are fun to do because there's no real like numbers to base it off of. Like you can try your best, but it's more so just what you see and what you project in the future, which I like a little bit more than the consistent just who's better off pure numbers type thing.
yeah. I think going off your point about players being asked like who's the best guy they ever went against, like sometimes it's a dude who like maybe they're not even good in the NBA. Because guys can just be amazing in high school, amazing in college, and then they just can't play in the NBA. This is to a lesser extent, but like I'm pretty sure it's Eric Gordon was like the best high school player in the country. He was very good in college, and then NBA, like he was fine, solid starter. But like it's just like crazy how these like players who are like all Americans and all like met whatever, and then they just can't play in the NBA at least to the same level. Uh, and then on the reverse, there's the guys like on this list no one is ever saying, "Oh, this is the best guy I played against. This guy dominated me," but then they sneak up on you and they become all stars.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get many people getting mad at me for not including Marcus Sasser or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is all Met a thing for everywhere around metropolitan areas, or is that just like a DC thing? Do you know?
That might just be a DC thing. I don't know, but
Yeah, I was thinking because I was like, I don't know. It's like New York City. Do they have all Met? Because I feel like that's got to be a pretty wide range, you know? Like we're already a relatively wide range, but anyway, I digress. So.